Do you feel tired all day, yet fully awake the moment your head meets the pillow? You close your eyes, but your thoughts refuse to follow. The quieter the room becomes, the louder your mind feels. If you found your way here tonight, it's not an accident, and you're not broken. Your mind is simply doing what it has learned to do. Stay alert. For now, there's nothing you need to fix, control, or understand. Just stay here. Listen. Let your breathing soften. The stories will carry your thoughts gently, and sleep will arrive when it's ready, without effort, without pressure. We're going to begin in ancient Rome, in a cave sacred to wolves, where blood flowed and drums pounded and nearly naked priests ran through stone streets, striking women with strips of goat hide. We'll witness the slow softening as Christianity replaced pagan wildness with spiritual devotion. We'll discover how a medieval poet transformed a saint's feast day into the first celebration of romantic love. And we'll end in the delicate world of Victorian Valentines, where paper lace and ribbon replaced stone altars and animal sacrifice. This is the evolution of affection, from Lupercalia to Valentine's Day. So settle deeper into your pillow. Let each word carry you backward through time, feeling the sensory shift from rhythmic feet pounding on ancient stone to the delicate touch of paper and lace against fingertips. There's nowhere to be, nothing to remember, just the gentle journey through the ages. Picture Rome in the year 200, at the height of the empire's power. It is February 15th, and the city prepares for one of its oldest and most important festivals, Lupercalia. The name comes from the Lupercal, a cave at the foot of the Palatine Hill where, according to legend, a she-wolf found the abandoned twins Romulus and Remus and nursed them back to health. This cave, this sacred grotto, is where our story begins. The air is cool, despite the afternoon sun. February in Rome brings temperatures that hover around 50 degrees, comfortable enough for the crowds that are already gathering near the Lupercal. The cave itself is dark, its mouth opening into the hillside like a wound in the earth. Inside, an altar has been prepared, ancient stone worn smooth by centuries of ritual. The smell of burning incense mingles with something more primal, the musky scent of animals brought for sacrifice. The Luperci arrive. These are the priests of the festival, young men between 20 and 40, members of elite families who have been chosen for this honor. They wear simple loincloths, their bodies otherwise bare, though soon they will be even more exposed to the elements and to the gaze of the crowd. 2 goats are led to the altar, bleating softly, unaware of their fate. A dog follows, its handler holding the leash firmly. Listen to the sound as the priest raises the sacrificial blade. It's not a clean, quick strike, but a ritual killing, deliberate and measured. The goat's blood flows onto the stone altar, dark and thick. The dog's blood mingles with it. This is purification, the Romans believe. The blood cleanses the city, drives away evil influences, prepares Rome for the coming spring when the year truly begins in March. Now comes a moment both strange and specific. 2 young Luperci are led to the altar. A priest dips the sacrificial knife into the fresh blood and touches it to their foreheads, leaving crimson marks between their eyes. The blood is warm, almost hot, against their skin. Immediately, other priests step forward with wool dipped in milk and wipe the blood away. And at this moment, these two young men must laugh. They must laugh out loud. The laughter is required, a release of tension, a signal of purification completed. Their laughter echoes in the cave, bouncing off stone walls, emerging into the afternoon air where the crowd waits. The feast follows. The sacrificed animals are cooked and shared, a communal meal celebrating fertility and abundance. But the most famous part of Lupercalia is yet to come. The Luperci take strips of hide from the sacrificed goats. These strips are called februa, the purification instruments that give February its name. The hides are still fresh, still carrying the warmth and smell of the animals. Some priests cut them into thongs, leather whips that will serve a sacred purpose. And then they run, clad in nothing but those goat skin strips tied around their waists, or sometimes completely naked. The Luperci burst from the cave and begin their circuit. They run along the ancient boundary of the Palatine Hill, their bare feet slapping against stone streets. Feel that rhythm in your imagination, the rapid pounding of dozens of feet on Roman paving stones, a percussion that echoes between buildings, that announces the festival's wildest moment. As they run, they strike. Anyone within reach of their goatskin thongs receives a blow, light, playful, but deliberate. The targets are often women, and far from fleeing, many women position themselves along the route, hoping to be struck. Because the Romans believe with absolute certainty that being hit by these februa will bring fertility, will ensure safe childbirth, will purify the body for the year ahead. Young wives hoping to conceive, pregnant women praying for easy delivery, they all extend their hands, bare their arms, accept these strikes as blessings. The sound is remarkable. The slap of leather against skin, the laughter and shouts of the crowd, the rhythmic thunder of running feet, drums somewhere keeping time. The Luperci themselves are laughing, shouting, their bodies glistening with sweat despite the cool air. This is not a solemn religious procession. This is controlled chaos, sanctioned wildness, the primal energy of fertility and purification given physical form. This is Lupercalia, raw, physical, rooted in blood and stone, and the deep Roman belief that purification requires both violence and laughter, that fertility must be struck into existence, that the boundary between sacred and sensual is thin and permeable. For centuries, this festival will mark mid-February until Christianity arrives and decides that such pagan wildness cannot be allowed to continue. As Rome transformed from pagan empire to Christian realm, the old festivals came under increasing scrutiny. By the late 4th century, church leaders had begun campaigning against Lupercalia, calling it immoral, pagan, incompatible with Christian values. The naked running, the sexual undertones, the sacrifice to old gods, all of it offended the new religious sensibility. In 494 or 496, Pope Gelasius I took decisive action. He issued a stern letter forbidding Christians from participating in Lupercalia. The festival, he declared, was banned. No more naked priests running through Roman streets. No more striking women with goatskin thongs. The purification rites that had marked mid-February for perhaps 1,000 years were officially over. But Gelasius didn't simply erase Lupercalia and leave nothing in its place. He established a feast day for Saint Valentine, a Christian martyr who had been executed on February 14th in the year 270. According to legend, Valentine was a priest who had performed marriages for Christians during a time when the Emperor Claudius II had forbidden them. Valentine was imprisoned, then beaten, then beheaded for his defiance. Here's what's important to understand. There was no romantic connection. Gelasius did not create Valentine's Day as a replacement for Lupercalia's fertility rites. He created a feast day to honor a martyr's death. The Saint Valentine celebrated in the late 5th century had nothing to do with love letters or romance or courtship. His feast day, February 14th, was simply the anniversary of his execution. The connection between Saint Valentine and romantic love wouldn't appear for another 900 years. It would take a poet's imagination working in a very different world to transform a martyr's feast day into a celebration of romance. The transition from Lupercalia's physical wildness to Valentine's spiritual devotion had occurred, but the final transformation from spiritual to romantic required the medieval invention of courtly love and one poet's brilliant literary innovation. Geoffrey Chaucer, born around 1343, lived in a world fascinated by courtly love. This medieval concept, developed in the courts of southern France and spreading across Europe, imagined love as ennobling, spiritual, often unrequited. Knights pledged devotion to unattainable ladies. Troubadours sang songs of longing and devotion. Love itself became a kind of religion with its own rituals and rules. In 1381 or 1382, Chaucer composed a poem called The Parliament of Fowls. It's a dream vision, a popular medieval form in which the narrator falls asleep and witnesses something strange and wonderful. In this case, he sees birds gathering to choose their mates. And when does this avian parliament convene? On St. Valentine's Day. For this was on St. Valentine's Day, Chaucer writes, when every fowl cometh there to choose his make, when every bird comes there to choose his mate. This is the first known reference in all of literature connecting St. Valentine's Day with romantic love. Scholars have searched earlier texts and found nothing. The association appears to be Chaucer's invention, his creative reimagining of an obscure saint's feast day. The poem may have been written to honor a real courtship, the lengthy negotiations leading to the marriage of 15-year-old King Richard II of England to Anne of Bohemia, also 15. 3 suitors, including the young king, had competed for Anne's hand. In Chaucer's poem, 3 male eagles compete for a female eagle, but she chooses none of them, asking instead for another year to decide. Nature, presiding over the parliament, grants her request, acknowledging the importance of free choice in matters of the heart. This was revolutionary. In an era when marriages were arranged for political and economic advantage, Chaucer's poem celebrated the right to choose one's own love. The female eagle's refusal wasn't rejection. It was the exercise of agency, the claim that she should determine her own romantic fate. And by setting this tale on St. Valentine's Day, Chaucer forever linked the date with the choice of romantic partners. Other poets followed Chaucer's lead. His friend Othon de Granson wrote French poems celebrating Valentine's Day as a day for lovers to pledge their devotion. John Gower mentioned a connection. By 1415, the French Duke of Orleans imprisoned in the Tower of London, was addressing his wife in a letter as "Ma dulce Valentine gent," my sweet, gentle Valentine. The practice of exchanging love notes on Valentine's Day began in the 15th century. These weren't the printed cards we know today, but handwritten letters, often poems, composed with care and delivered in secret or with great ceremony. Picture a medieval scribe's chamber late at night. A single candle burns, its flame flickering in drafts that slip through stone walls. The scribe sits at a wooden desk, a piece of parchment before him, a quill pen in his hand. Feel the quill in your imagination. It's made from a goose feather, the shaft hollow and light, the tip carefully cut at an angle to create a sharp writing point. The scribe dips it into an ink pot, drawing up black liquid made from oak galls and iron salts. The smell is faintly metallic tannic, nothing like modern ink. He touches quill to parchment and begins to write. Verses declaring devotion, comparing his beloved to a rose or the morning star, promising eternal faithfulness. Listen to the sound of writing. The scratch of quill on parchment, a gentle scraping rhythm, sometimes pausing as the writer considers the next word, then resuming. It's so different from the earlier sounds of Lupercalia. No pounding feet, no drums, no slap of leather on skin. This is intimate, quiet, measured. The sound of thought becoming word, feeling becoming symbol. The sensory world has shifted from stone and blood to parchment and ink. When the letter is finished, it must be sealed. The scribe folds the parchment carefully. He melts sealing wax over a flame, red wax, the color of passion, and drips it onto the fold. He presses his signet ring into the warm wax, creating an impression, a mark of authenticity. The sealed letter is then delivered to the beloved, who breaks the seal with anticipation, unfolding the parchment to read words written just for her. This is how love began to be expressed in the age of courtly romance, not through ritual violence or public spectacle, but through the private exchange of words, the whispered declaration made permanent in ink. Valentine's Day, thanks to Chaucer's imaginative leap, had become the occasion for these exchanges. For centuries, Valentine's notes remained handwritten, personal creations. But the 19th century brought technological changes that would transform the holiday once again. In 1834, an Englishman named Joseph Addenbrooke accidentally invented paper lace. Working for a company that made embossed papers, he filed off the raised parts and was left with a pattern of tiny holes that looked remarkably like delicate lace. This discovery would revolutionize Valentine's cards. By the 1840s, commercial Valentines were being produced in England. These weren't simple notes, but elaborate creations featuring paper lace, hand-tinted lithographs, embossed designs, ribbons, and flowers. They were works of art, each one a small masterpiece of Victorian sentiment and craft. And then came the penny post. In 1840, Great Britain introduced a revolutionary system. Letters could be mailed anywhere in the country for just 1 penny. Before this, the recipient paid postage based on distance and number of pages, often costing more than a day's wages. The penny post made sending letters affordable for ordinary people, and Valentine's cards suddenly could be mailed to anyone, anywhere, for almost nothing. The impact was immediate and dramatic. In 1871, the post office estimated that 1.2 million Valentines had been mailed in London alone. postmen received special meal allowances to keep them sustained during the February rush. The simple act of mailing a Valentine became a national phenomenon. Across the ocean, a young American woman named Esther Howland saw opportunity. In 1849, the 20-year-old from Worcester, Massachusetts, created her first Valentine prototypes inspired by the elaborate British cards sold in her father's shop. She imported paper lace and floral decorations from England, then assembled cards by hand. Her creations were expensive, the equivalent of more than $100 in today's money. But they were extraordinary, and they sold widely. Howland became known as the mother of the American Valentine. Her success inspired competitors, and soon American companies were mass-producing cards. By the mid-1850s, millions of Valentines were being sent annually. The tradition had fully commercialized, democratized, become accessible to everyone regardless of wealth or social station. Feel a Victorian Valentine in your imagination. The paper is thick, textured, nothing like modern cardstock. Around its border runs delicate paper lace, so intricate it seems impossibly fragile, like frozen spiderweb. Your fingertips trace the tiny perforations, feeling how the paper has been transformed into something that looks like fabric. Silk ribbons are woven through the lace, soft and cool to the touch. In the center, a chromolithographed image, roses perhaps, or clasped hands, or a pair of doves, colored with delicate precision. The whole card carries a faint scent, the paper, the glue, the ink, all mingling into something uniquely of its era. This is how far we've traveled from Lupercalia's stone altar and blood sacrifice, from the thunder of bare feet on Roman streets to the whisper of paper against paper as a card is removed from its envelope, from goatskin thongs striking flesh to silk ribbon sliding between fingers, from public spectacle to private gesture. The evolution of affection made tangible in the transformation of materials from stone to parchment to paper lace. Today, Valentine's Day is celebrated globally. Billions of cards are exchanged, along with flowers, chocolate, gifts of every description. The holiday has become commercial, yes, but it still carries traces of its long journey. The blood and wildness of Lupercalia are gone, replaced by gentler expressions. The spiritual martyrdom of Saint Valentine has faded, replaced by romantic devotion. What remains is Chaucer's gift, the idea that this day belongs to lovers, that mid-February is the season for declaring affection, for choosing partners, for celebrating the tender vulnerabilities of the human heart. As this story slowly fades, there's no need to hold on to it. Let the images dissolve on their own, like breath in the dark. Another story is already waiting, calm, unhurried, and ready to carry your thoughts even deeper. Picture Europe in the late 1500s. For over 1,000 years, the Western world has lived by the Julian calendar, established by Julius Caesar in the year 45 before Christ. It's a good calendar, reasonable for its time, dividing the year into 365 days, with an extra day every fourth year to account for the extra quarter day it takes Earth to orbit the Sun. But there's a problem. The Julian calendar isn't quite accurate enough. It loses about 11 minutes per year, and over centuries, those minutes add up. By 1582, The calendar has drifted 10 full days out of sync with the astronomical reality of seasons and lunar cycles. This matters enormously to the Catholic Church, which calculates the date of Easter based on the spring equinox and the phases of the moon. But the spring equinox, which should fall around March 21st, has been creeping earlier and earlier in the calendar. The Church's careful calculations for when to celebrate Christianity's most important feast day no longer align with the actual movements of heavenly bodies. Pope Gregory XIII, working with astronomers and mathematicians, issues a papal bull ordering sweeping calendar reform. The Gregorian calendar, as it comes to be known, makes several changes. It creates a more accurate leap year system. And crucially for our story, it moves the start of the new year. In many places under the old Julian system, the new year began around the spring equinox, in late March or early April. Under the Gregorian calendar, January 1st becomes the official start of the year. France actually makes this change earlier, in 1564, when King Charles IX issues the Edict of Roussillon, declaring January 1st as New Year's Day. Other Catholic countries follow when Pope Gregory formalizes the broader calendar reform in 1582. On October 4th of that year, people in Catholic nations go to sleep. When they wake the next morning, it's October 15th. 10 days have simply been removed from the calendar, erased to correct the accumulated drift. But here's where the chaos begins. News in the 16th century travels slowly, agonizingly slowly by our standards. There are no newspapers reaching every village, no telegraph or telephone, no internet or television. Information moves at the speed of horse and cart, or at best, the speed of a messenger on horseback. A proclamation issued in Rome might take weeks or months to reach rural France, longer still to penetrate into remote countryside villages. And even when the news arrives, not everyone understands it. Not everyone can read the official proclamations posted in town squares. Many people, particularly in rural areas, are illiterate. They rely on local priests or town criers to explain new laws and decrees, and sometimes those explanations are unclear or incomplete, or simply dismissed as irrelevant to daily life. Picture a small village in the French countryside, perhaps in Provence or Burgundy, in the spring of 1583. The village has celebrated the new year in late March or early April for as long as anyone can remember. Their parents did it, their grandparents did it, their great-grandparents stretching back through the generations. It's tradition tied to the spring equinox, to the renewal of life, to the planting season beginning. The new year starts when the world itself renews, when winter's death gives way to spring's resurrection. And now someone arrives saying, no, actually the new year started months ago. Back in January, you missed it. You're living in the wrong year. Your calendar is obsolete. Time itself has changed while you weren't paying attention. Some people accept this easily enough. Others are confused, uncertain, and still others, particularly the elderly and the stubbornly traditional, simply refuse. This is how it's always been done, they say. Who is some distant pope to tell us when the year begins? We know when the year begins. It begins in spring, as it always has, as it always should. These people, the ones who either didn't know about the calendar change or who refused to accept it, became known as April Fools. They were people left behind in time, celebrating a new year that was no longer new, marking a date that had lost its official meaning. And their neighbors, the ones who had adopted the new calendar, began to mock them. Walk with me through the streets of a French town on the morning of April 1st, 1585. The air is cool and damp, carrying that particular chill that comes just before sunrise. Mist rises from the river, drifting between buildings like ethereal curtains, softening the hard edges of stone walls and cobblestone streets. The town is waking slowly. Wooden shutters creak open on their iron hinges. The smell of bread baking in wood-fired ovens begins to drip from the bakery, yeasty and warm, mixing with the ever-present scent of horse dung and the green smell of spring arriving. Church bells ring in the distance, marking the hour. Their sound echoes off stone walls, metallic and clear in the cool morning air. And somewhere in this waking town, a prank is being prepared. The French called it Poisson d'Avril, April fish. The term appears in written records as early as 1508 in a poem by Éloy de Merval, though whether it referred to April 1st specifically or simply to a gullible person isn't entirely clear. By the late 1500s, after the calendar change, the tradition has become associated with those who still celebrated the new year in April. Picture a young man, perhaps in his 20s, walking through those misty streets. He carries a piece of paper, cut and folded to resemble a fish. It's crude, this paper fish, drawn with charcoal or ink, nothing elaborate, just the simple outline of a fish, recognizable but undetailed. He approaches an older neighbor, a man known in the village for his stubborn adherence to the old calendar, who still insists on giving New Year's gifts in April rather than January. The young man greets the neighbor warmly, engages him in conversation, distracts him, and while they talk, deftly, quickly, he attaches the paperfish to the back of the old man's coat. He uses a small tack, or perhaps tree sap as an adhesive, something that will hold the fish in place as the man goes about his day. Then the young man takes his leave, struggling to keep a straight face. The older man continues his morning errands unaware. He walks to the market, the paper fish fluttering slightly on his back. He stops to talk with the butcher. He examines vegetables at a farmer's stall. And everywhere he goes, people notice the fish and smile. Some stifle laughter behind their hands. Others exchange knowing glances. The joke spreads through the market like ripples on water. Everyone knows what the fish means. This man is an April fish, caught out by the calendar change, still swimming in the old year while everyone else has moved on to the new. Eventually, someone takes pity and tells him, or perhaps he catches sight of his reflection in a window and notices the paper fluttering at his back. He pulls off the fish, his face flushing with embarrassment and anger, and the young prankster, watching from a distance, calls out, "Poisson d'Avril, April fish." This is how it began, not as the light-hearted fun we know today, but as mockery, as social correction, as a way of policing conformity to the new calendar. There were other pranks too, fake invitations to New Year's celebrations that didn't exist, gag gifts exchanged on April 1st, reminding the recipient that they were observing the wrong date. Sometimes real fish were involved, not fresh ones from the market, but fish that had gone bad, attached to clothing where the smell would linger unnoticed for hours. Feel the weight of these early pranks. There's an edge to them, a cruelty softened only slightly by laughter. The French streets where they occurred were not filled with joyful lightheartedness, but with the damp chill of early spring mornings, with the hard reality of wooden heels clicking on wet cobblestones, with the genuine confusion of people trying to navigate a world where something as fundamental as the calendar had changed beneath their feet. But time, as it always does, softened the edges. What began as mockery of the genuinely confused gradually transformed into something lighter, more playful, more universally embraced. By the 18th century, April Fool's Day had spread beyond France. Britain adopted the Gregorian calendar in 1752, more than a century and a half after Catholic Europe. And with it came the tradition of April 1st pranks. The nature of the jokes began to change. They became less about calendar confusion. By the 1700s, everyone knew when the new year began, and more about the simple joy of harmless deception. Friends tricked friends. Children fooled parents. Even newspapers and media outlets got involved, publishing outrageous false stories designed to fool readers before revealing the joke. One of the most famous early media hoaxes occurred in 1957 when the BBC aired a segment showing Swiss farmers harvesting spaghetti from spaghetti trees. The footage showed people carefully picking strands of spaghetti from tree branches and laying them out to dry. It was absurd, obviously fake to anyone who gave it a moment's thought, but a deadpan narration and official BBC presentation convinced hundreds of viewers. The network received calls from people asking how they could grow their own spaghetti trees. By the 20th century, April Fool's Day had become a global phenomenon. Companies saw the marketing potential in elaborate pranks, creating fake product announcements that garnered widespread attention and free publicity. In 1996, Taco Bell took out full-page newspaper ads announcing they'd purchased the Liberty Bell and would be renaming it the Taco Liberty Bell. In 2008, the BBC again fooled viewers, this time with footage of penguins that could supposedly fly. The pranks had evolved from paperfish on backs to sophisticated multimedia hoaxes. The sensory experience shifted as well. Instead of the weight of damp cobblestones and the smell of morning mist, April Fool's Day became associated with the lightness of laughter, the surprise of a well-executed joke, the collective experience of millions of people around the world sharing in harmless fun. But underneath this evolution, from 16th century mockery to 21st century corporate pranks, runs a deeper current. The calendar change of 1582 was genuinely chaotic and confusing. Imagine living in a world where time itself suddenly reorganized, where the rhythms you'd known your entire life, the markers by which you measured the year's passage, were declared obsolete and replaced with something new. This kind of fundamental disruption creates anxiety. It destabilizes the familiar, leaves people feeling unmoored and uncertain. And in the face of such chaos, humans have always reached for the same coping mechanism: laughter. Laughter is how we process the absurd. It's how we acknowledge difficulty without being crushed by it. The early April Fool's pranks, cruel though they might seem to us now, served a social function. They helped communities navigate change by transforming confusion into comedy, by making the transition from old calendar to new, into something that could be laughed about rather than only worried over. And as the original source of confusion faded into history, the laughter remained. Because humans need play. We need moments when the usual rules don't apply, when we're allowed to deceive and be deceived in ways that ultimately harm no one. April Fool's Day evolved into a sanctioned festival of harmless chaos, a day when we collectively agree that nothing can quite be trusted, that everyone might be trying to trick us, and that's not just okay, it's fun. Modern research validates this instinct. Studies have shown that laughter reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, boosts immune function, and releases endorphins that improve mood. April Fool's Day, at its best, provides all these benefits. It encourages jokes, hoaxes, pranks, and belly laughs. It brings the health benefits of humor while also creating shared social experiences that bind communities together. The global spread of April 1st celebrations reveals something universal about human nature. Whether you call it April Fools in English, Poisson d'avril in French, April Snar in Danish, or any of the dozens of other names it carries across cultures, the impulse is the same: to find moments of playfulness in the midst of ordinary life, to laugh at confusion rather than be defeated by it, to transform the calendar's ancient trick into an annual celebration of human creativity and joy. The moment has passed, and nothing needs to follow it. Thoughts can loosen, time can blur. Without noticing when it happens, a new story begins, quietly guiding your mind further away from wakefulness. Picture Ireland 2,000 years ago, in the final days of October. The landscape is transformed from summer's abundance. The golden fields of barley and wheat have been harvested, the stalks cut and bundled, the grain threshed and stored for winter. The cattle, which have grazed on high summer pastures since May, are being driven back down to lower ground, their breath misting in the cold air. Some will not survive the coming months. The herdsmen choose which animals to slaughter now, before the deep cold sets in, providing meat that will keep in the November freeze. This is Samhain, pronounced Samhain, meaning summer's end. It falls on the night of October 31st, stretching into November 1st, roughly halfway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. For the ancient Celts, this night marks more than a change in weather. It marks the end of the light half of the year and the beginning of the dark half, the transition from growth and abundance to stillness and endurance, from the golden warmth of harvest to the gray cold of winter. Feel the quality of air on this evening. It's different from summer air, crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from cooking fires, of fallen leaves beginning their slow decay back into earth, of the metallic tang that precedes the first hard frost. The sun sets earlier now, the darkness arriving while people are still at their evening tasks. And on this particular night, the Celts believe something profound happens. The boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead grows thin. The veil between worlds, that's how they understand it, as a kind of membrane that normally separates our realm from the other world, where spirits dwell, where ancestors wait, where the fairy folk and mysterious beings make their homes. Most of the year, this veil is strong, impermeable. But at Samhain, During the seasonal transition, it weakens. It grows so thin that spirits can pass through. The dead can visit the living, and the living, if they're not careful, might find themselves pulled into realms they don't understand. So the community prepares. On hilltops across Ireland and Scotland, great bonfires are built. Feel the work of it, gathering wood, dry branches and logs, stacking them high into massive piles. As darkness falls and the Samhain night truly begins, the fires are lit. Not with flint and tinder as you might imagine, but sometimes with a wheel device that creates friction, producing sparks that catch in dry grass or moss. The wheel represents the sun, that life-giving presence now weakening as winter approaches. Watch as the fires catch and grow. The flames climb higher, orange and yellow against the dark sky, throwing sparks into the night air. The heat is intense. You can feel it from 50 feet away, warming your face while your back remains cold. And now the bones are added. The Celts have slaughtered cattle for winter provisions, and they take the bones, still carrying scraps of meat and marrow, and cast them into the flames. This is where our word bonfire originates. Not bon, meaning good as many believe, but bone fire. The bones crack and pop in the heat, releasing a smell that's both terrible and somehow sacred, burning fat, charring marrow, the smoke thick and acrid. This is purification. This is protection. The community gathers around these fires, and each household will take flame from this communal blaze back to their own hearths, which they've allowed to go cold. They'll relight their home fires with this sacred flame, carrying protection into their dwellings for the dark months ahead. But the fires serve another purpose too. They're a signal, a beacon. In the darkness, the spirits can see these flames and know where the living are, where offerings wait. Because the Celts leave food out on this night. Bread, perhaps, milk, ale, portions of the feast they're preparing for themselves. These offerings are for the ancestors, the beloved dead who might visit during this time when the veil is thin. The food is set outside doors, at the edges of fields, hoping the spirits will accept these gifts and bring blessings rather than trouble. And the masks. This is crucial to understanding. On Samhain night, people disguise themselves. They wear animal skins, perhaps a deer hide draped over shoulders and head. They blacken their faces with ash from the bonfires, smearing it across cheeks and foreheads. They put on grotesque masks carved from wood, painted with frightening expressions. Why? Not to scare each other, but to blend, to become invisible to harmful spirits. If you look like a spirit yourself, if you're unrecognizable as a living human, the dangerous entities roaming this night might pass you by. There's another theory, too, that people dressed as spirits or the dead as a way of honoring them, of representing the IOC, the fairy folk and ancestral spirits, in physical form. By embodying these beings, the living create a bridge between worlds, make the invisible visible, acknowledge the presence of forces usually hidden from view. Picture yourself in such a disguise, standing near the bonfire. You're wrapped in heavy wool, rough against your skin, dyed dark colors that won't show dirt. Over this, you've draped an animal skin, the fur still carrying the faint scent of the beast it once protected. Your face is blackened, the ash gritty against your skin. Through your disguise, you watch the fire, feel its heat, smell the burning bones, And know that tonight, the normal rules are suspended. Tonight, you walk in a world where the dead and the living share the same space. As centuries passed and Christianity spread across Celtic lands, the old festival of Samhain didn't disappear, it transformed. Around the year 600, Pope Boniface IV dedicated May 13th as a day to honor Christian martyrs. But by the year 800, churches in Gaelic Ireland and Anglo-Saxon Northumbria were holding a feast commemorating All Saints on November 1st. This eventually became All Saints' Day throughout the Christian world. The day after, November 2nd, became All Souls' Day, dedicated specifically to praying for the dead. The church did what it often did with pagan festivals. It absorbed them, reshaped them, gave them Christian meaning, while allowing some of the old traditions to continue in altered form. Bonfires still burned on these nights, but now they were said to represent the souls in purgatory being purified by holy fire. People still wore disguises, but now they might dress as saints or angels rather than spirits or animals. And a new tradition emerged, particularly in Britain: souling. Picture a village in medieval England, perhaps in Cheshire or Yorkshire, on the evening of November 1st or 2nd. It's cold, the kind of damp cold that seeps into your bones. The sun has set, and darkness settles over the village like a heavy blanket. Inside the cottages, families are finishing their evening meals, sitting near fires built from peat or wood, the smoke escaping through holes in thatched roofs. And then there's a knock at the door, a wooden door, thick and heavy, set into a stone or wattle and daub wall. The knock echoes in the small space. The family looks up. The father rises and opens the door. And there on the threshold stand 3 or 4 people, faces blackened with ash or covered in cloth, sometimes wearing long black cloaks. They might be children, they might be adults, the poor of the parish begging for charity, and they begin to sing, "A soul, a soul, a soul cake. Please, good missus, a soul cake. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all." This is souling. The practice dates back at least to the early 1500s, with the first written reference appearing in 1511. The soulers go from door to door, offering prayers and songs in exchange for soul cakes. Small round cakes made with flour, sugar, spices like nutmeg and cinnamon, and currants or raisins. They're somewhere between a cookie and a biscuit, marked on top with a cross to signify their sacred purpose. The theology is specific. In medieval Catholic belief, when most people died, their souls went to purgatory, a state of purification before they could enter heaven. The living could help these souls through prayer and good works. Each soul cake given to the poor was believed to free one soul from purgatory suffering. So when a housewife bakes soul cakes and gives them to soulers, she's performing an act of charity that has both earthly and spiritual dimensions. She's feeding the hungry, yes, but she's also helping the dead. Feel the texture of a soul cake in your imagination. It's still warm from the oven, the exterior slightly crisp, the interior soft and yielding. The spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, perhaps a hint of ginger, create a warm, comforting smell that cuts through the cold November air. The currants add little bursts of sweetness. This is a treat, something special, made for these particular days of the year. The soulers often carry turnip lanterns. Turnips, those hard root vegetables, hollowed out and carved with faces a candle flickering inside. The light shines through the carved eyes and mouth, creating a ghostly, wavering glow. These lanterns serve practical purposes, lighting the way through dark village streets, but they carry symbolic weight too. They represent souls trapped in purgatory, the light within suggesting hope for eventual release. Or they ward off evil spirits, frightening them away with their grotesque carved features. Listen to the sounds of souling night. The knock on wooden doors, echoing in the cold air. The singing voices, not always beautiful but earnest. The words passed down through generations. The rustle of cloaks and costumes. Church bells ringing in the distance, calling the faithful to pray for the dead. The crackle of fires and hearths, the smell of soul cakes baking, sweet and spiced, mingling with wood smoke, and the ever-present scent of animals kept in byres attached to cottages. This tradition persists for centuries, gradually shifting from a primarily adult activity to something done by children. By the 1800s, souling has become a children's custom in many areas. Groups of kids going from house to house in costume, sometimes performing little songs or poems in exchange for cakes, apples, ale, or even coins. The spiritual meaning fades somewhat, but the structure remains. Disguise, door-to-door visits, performance, and treats. The souling tradition might have faded entirely in Britain, becoming a quaint rural custom that disappeared with industrialization. But history had other plans. In the 1840s, Ireland experienced catastrophic famine. The potato crop failed, and over 1 million people died while another million emigrated, many to America. With them came their traditions, their stories, their memories of souling and Samhain, of carved turnips and costumes, and the belief that the veil between worlds grows thin at this time of year. These Irish immigrants, along with Scottish settlers, brought their Halloween customs to America, where they blended with other harvest traditions. The carved turnip lanterns transformed into jack-o'-lanterns carved from pumpkins, which were more plentiful and easier to hollow out than the tough European turnips. The custom of going house to house in costume seeking treats, once connected to praying for souls in purgatory, gradually became secular, a children's game disconnected from its religious roots. By the early 1900s, Halloween was becoming established as an American holiday. Though it looked different from today's version, it was more about community parties and pranks than trick-or-treating. But after World War II in the 1950s, the modern form crystallized. Trick-or-treating became standardized, commercialized, spread through media and magazines as the proper way to celebrate. Costume companies produced mass-market costumes. Candy companies saw opportunity. Within a generation, Halloween had transformed from a hodgepodge of regional traditions into a major commercial holiday with recognized rituals, costumes, trick-or-treating, jack-o'-lanterns, parties. And as American culture spread globally through movies and television, Halloween spread too. By the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Halloween celebrations appeared in countries that had never had souling or Samhain traditions. Japan, Mexico, Australia all adopted versions of Halloween, each culture adding its own touches to the basic template of costumes and candy. So, what has changed in this 2,000-year journey? And what has remained the same? The sensory experience has transformed almost completely. Those ancient Samhain nights were filled with the smell of burning bones, the acrid smoke that stung your eyes and caught in your throat. The cold was real and biting, with only wool and fur and fire to protect you from it. The darkness was absolute, except for the flames. The sounds were organic: crackling fire, lowing cattle, human voices raised in ritual or song, the wind moving through bare tree branches. Now picture a modern Halloween night in suburban America. The air carries the smell of pumpkin spice lattes and artificial fog from party decorators. Children in costumes walk under streetlights, the neon and LED glow turning night into an artificial twilight. Plastic decorations hang from houses, inflatable monsters, blinking lights, store-bought cobwebs. The sounds are recorded, spooky soundtracks playing from hidden speakers, doorbells chiming, parents' voices calling warnings about staying on sidewalks. From sacred communal bonfires on hilltops to porch lights left on to signal trick-or-treaters are welcome. From wearing masks to blend with spirits, to wearing costumes to stand out, to win prizes for most creative or most frightening. From leaving food offerings for ancestors to handing out mass-produced candy to neighborhood children. From the profound belief that the veil between worlds grows thin to the playful pretense that monsters and ghosts might be real, and yet something essential remains. The recognition that autumn's end marks a transition, a threshold. The donning of disguises still after all these centuries. The gathering of community, whether around a bonfire or in a neighborhood party. The acknowledgement, however secularized, that darkness is falling, that winter is coming, that this liminal moment between light and dark deserves marking. Halloween is no longer a festival of the dead, not really, but it still carries traces of that ancient understanding. In the carved pumpkins glowing on doorsteps, we can see echoes of those turnip lanterns carried by medieval soldiers. In children's costumes, we can trace lineages back to Celts, blackening their faces with ash. In the very act of trick-or-treating, we can hear faint echoes of a soul cake, please, good missus, a soul cake. The human need to mark transitions, to acknowledge the mysterious, to transform fear into play through ritual and costume. These haven't changed. Only the expression has evolved, from the profound reverence of Samhain's sacred fires to the light-hearted celebration of modern Halloween's neon glow. There is nothing to remember now, and nothing to prepare for. The mind can rest between stories, drifting gently, and as one voice softens, another begins, slower, steadier, and closer to sleep. Let yourself settle deeper into your pillow now. Feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders, drifting away like morning mist. Tonight, we're traveling back through time, following a single phrase as it transforms from whispers of financial ruin to the bright clamor of retail celebration. Close your eyes and let the story wash over you, gentle as an evening tide. We're going to explore how two words, Black Friday, carried darkness in 1869, then lay dormant for generations before being reborn as something entirely different. It's a story of transformation, of how language evolves, and how what once meant disaster can become in time something people anticipate with excitement rather than dread. Breathe slowly. Let your mind wander back through the decades, through the centuries, to a September morning when gold was king and men believed they could bend the world to their will. Picture Lower Manhattan in the autumn of 1869. The air carries the salt tang of the harbor mixed with coal smoke from steamships and the earthy smell of horses that pull carriages over cobblestone streets worn smooth by decades of commerce. The city is still healing from the Civil War that ended just 4 years earlier. Buildings wear their soot like mourning clothes, and men in threadbare suits conduct business alongside those whose fortunes survived the conflict intact. At the corner of William Street and Exchange Place stands a building known simply as the Gold Room. This is the New York Gold Exchange, and it is the beating heart of American finance in this peculiar moment when the nation uses two currencies, gold and greenbacks, those paper dollars printed to fund the war. The exchange rate between them fluctuates like a fever, and fortunes rise and fall on these fluctuations like ships on stormy seas. Inside the Gold Room, sunlight filters through tall windows, catching motes of dust that dance above the heads of brokers and speculators. The centerpiece of the room is almost whimsical. A bronze fountain featuring a cupid riding a dolphin, with goldfish swimming lazily in the basin below. But there's nothing whimsical about the men who gather here. They watch a mechanical indicator on the wall, a device that displays the current price of gold, updated by telegraph signals from the trading floor. The young man operating this indicator is Thomas Edison, not yet famous, just another worker trying to make his way in the world. The telegraph key clicks and clicks and clicks, a rhythm like rain on a tin roof, carrying price updates to brokerage houses throughout Manhattan. Each click represents money changing hands, fortunes being made or lost in the span of a heartbeat. Two men have orchestrated what's unfolding this September. Jay Gould, 33 years old, is a secretive figure who tends orchids in a rooftop greenhouse and spins financial schemes in shadowed rooms. People call him the Mephistopheles of Wall Street. He moves like a spider, they say, weaving webs in corners and darkness. His partner, James Fisk, known as Jubilee Jim, is Gould's opposite in every way. He wears military uniforms with no military service, sports a waxed mustache, and lives loud where Gould lives quiet. Together, they control the Erie Railroad and have decided to control something else, gold itself. Their plan is elegant in its audacity. They will buy gold as much as they can acquire, driving the price upward through sheer demand. When gold reaches astronomical heights, they will sell, pocketing the difference. The scheme requires one crucial element. The United States Treasury must not flood the market with its reserves of gold. To ensure this, they've cultivated connections. Abel Corbin, President Ulysses Grant's brother-in-law, has been recruited. General Daniel Butterfield, Assistant Treasurer, has been bribed with a stake in the scheme and a $10,000 loan. The fix, they believe, is in. Through early September, Gould and Fisk accumulate gold quietly, using brokers to mask their identities. The price climbs from $132 per ounce to $141. The telegraph keeps clicking, faster now, more urgent. Men crowd the Gold Room, voices rising in competition, hands gesturing wildly as they call out bids and offers. The fountain, with its bronze cupid, seems to mock them with its serenity. But President Grant, despite his brother-in-law's entreaties, begins to suspect something amiss. His wife receives a letter from her sister-in-law, warning of Corbin's speculation. Grant orders his wife to write back, "Get out. Abandon the scheme. The president will do his duty." Corbin shows this warning to Gould on Thursday evening, September 23rd. Gould, true to his spider nature, says nothing to his partners. Instead, while Fisk continues buying gold on Friday morning, driving the price toward $160, Gould quietly sells his holdings. He is abandoning ship while his partner captains it toward the rocks. Friday, September 24. The telegraph clicks frantically. In brokerage offices throughout the city, men watch the price indicators spin upward, unable to believe what they are seeing. Gold at 150, 155, 160. The gold room is packed with bodies, with heat, with the smell of sweat and fear and greed mingling in the air. Voices rise to shouting, then to roaring. Men clutch at each other's sleeves, at lapels, desperate for information, for reassurance, for salvation. Then the telegraph brings different news. President Grant has ordered Treasury Secretary George Boatwell to sell $4 million in government gold immediately. The price collapses. Not gradually, not gently, but with the speed of a stone dropped from a great height. 160 becomes 130 in a matter of hours. The roar in the gold room transforms from triumph to anguish. Men realize in seconds that they are ruined. Brokerage firms that stood solid for generations crumble like sand castles before the tide. By day's end, mobs have gathered in the streets outside calling for Gould's head. He remains barricaded inside the Erie Railroad offices with armed guards while Fisk ventures out only to be punched in the nose by an angry investor. The crash radiates outward from Wall Street like ripples from a stone thrown in still water. The stock market loses 20% of its value in a week. Wheat prices on the Chicago Exchange plummet from $1.40 a bushel to 77 cents. Corn drops from 95 cents to 68 cents. Farmers, half the nation's workforce, watch their harvests become worth a fraction of what they'd anticipated. Ships sit idle in harbors, their holds full of goods that can no longer be sold abroad. The American economy, still fragile from the Civil War, shudders, but does not quite break. This day, this terrible Friday in September of 1869, earns its name, Black Friday, the first Black Friday, a day of financial darkness, of fortunes lost, of trust shattered. The phrase enters the American vocabulary as a synonym for disaster, for schemes gone wrong, for the moment when greed overreaches and everything collapses. For decades after that catastrophic September day, Black Friday meant only one thing: the gold panic of 1869. It appeared in history books, in newspaper retrospectives, in caution tales told to young financiers about the dangers of market manipulation. The phrase carried weight, carried warning, carried the memory of ruin. But language, like rivers, follows courses that aren't always predictable. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, as the wounds of the Civil War gradually healed and America transformed from an agricultural nation into an industrial power, the specific memory of September 24, 1869 began to fade. New crises arose: the Panic of 1873, the Panic of 1893, and eventually the Great Depression following the stock market crash of 1929, itself initially called Black Thursday and Black Tuesday, borrowing that color of catastrophe for new disasters. Through all of this, the day after Thanksgiving was simply the day after Thanksgiving. Department stores, which had emerged as cathedrals of commerce in the late 1800s, recognized it as a good day for business. People had the day off. Families gathered for feasts, and after eating, some would venture out to begin their Christmas shopping. Store owners noticed this pattern, advertised their wares, opened their doors to welcome the post-holiday crowds. But no one called it anything special, not yet. The transformation was still waiting, gestating somewhere in the American consciousness, waiting for the right moment, the right city, the right confluence of circumstances to be born. The country moved forward. The telegraph gave way to the telephone. Horses disappeared from city streets, replaced by automobiles. The gold room became a historical footnote, a curiosity, a story grandparents might tell about the old days when men wore top hats and traded gold in a room with a fountain. The phrase Black Friday lay dormant like a seed buried in soil, waiting for conditions that would allow it to germinate into something entirely new. Fast forward now through the decades. The Great Depression has come and gone. World War II has been fought and won. America in the 1950s is prosperous, optimistic, expanding into suburbs connected by new highways. Television flickers in living rooms. Department stores grow larger, shinier, more magnificent. And in Philadelphia, something is happening that will resurrect those two words and give them an entirely different meaning. The City of Brotherly Love hosts an annual tradition, the Army-Navy football game, played on the Saturday following Thanksgiving. This rivalry between the military academies draws enormous crowds, not just cadets and midshipmen, but alumni, families, fans who travel from across the nation to witness the spectacle. They arrive on Friday, all of them, thousands upon thousands flooding into the city on the same day that local residents venture out to begin their Christmas shopping. Picture the scene through the eyes of a Philadelphia police officer. You're directing traffic at a major intersection downtown. It's the Friday after Thanksgiving, and you've been on duty since early morning. You were supposed to have the day off. It's a holiday after all, but a department canceled all leave because they know what's coming. They know from experience. The streets are gridlocked. Cars inch forward, then stop, then inch forward again. Horns blare in frustration. Suburban shoppers who drove in are competing for space with tour buses full of football fans. Pedestrians swarm the sidewalks, spilling into the streets, forcing traffic to halt while they cross. The department stores have their doors wide open, heat bleeding out into the November air, music and bright lights spilling onto the pavement. You can smell roasted chestnuts from a street vendor's cart, mixing with exhaust fumes and the cold metal scent of coming snow. Your feet ache in your shoes. Your uniform feels too tight. You've already dealt with 3 fender benders, 2 lost children, and a shoplifter who tried to run but didn't get far in the crowd. It's not even noon yet, and you're scheduled to work a 12-hour shift, maybe longer if the chaos continues into the evening. Your partner approaches, directing a pedestrian to cross at the corner rather than between cars. "Another Black Friday," he mutters, and you nod in grim agreement. That's what you call it now, you and your fellow officers. Black Friday, the worst day of the year for Philadelphia police. The day when the city's infrastructure groans under the weight of too many people, too many cars, too much commerce conducted too quickly in too small a space. The phrase spreads through the department, becomes part of the local vocabulary. Radio dispatchers use it. Officers planning their schedules grimace at the words. News reporters, picking up on the term, begin using it in their coverage of the annual chaos. Black Friday in Philadelphia, the day after Thanksgiving, when shopping and football collide to create perfect pandemonium. By 1961, the term has become so prevalent and so negative that Philadelphia's city merchants and the Chamber of Commerce decide something must be done. A public relations campaign is launched to rebrand the day. Big Friday, they suggest, a positive name, emphasizing not the chaos but the importance, the magnitude, the significance of the shopping day. Big Friday. Come to the stores, celebrate commerce. It doesn't work. Language, once it finds a foothold in popular consciousness, resists easy displacement. People keep saying Black Friday because that's what it is. That's what it feels like to everyone navigating the crowds and traffic and overwhelming bustle. The PR campaign fades. Black Friday remains, but still as a regional term, something Philadelphians say, something that hasn't yet spread beyond the city limits to the nation at large. The term appears in a few scattered newspaper articles throughout the 1960s and 70s. The New York Times first uses it in 1975, explaining it as Philadelphia's phrase for the busiest shopping day of the year. Retailers in other cities remain unaware. In Cincinnati and Los Angeles, according to reports from 1985, merchants have never heard the term. Black Friday is still Philadelphia's private language for its annual ordeal. But transformation is coming. The seed planted in police frustration, watered by decades of repetition, is about to bloom into something vast. In the 1980s, American retail undergoes a shift in how it thinks about the day after Thanksgiving. Merchants have long recognized it as important as a strong sales day, but they're beginning to see it as something more, potentially the most important day of the year, the day that can determine whether the entire holiday season succeeds or fails. Someone, somewhere, and history has lost the name of who precisely has an idea. The phrase Black Friday exists, carries weight, has recognition, at least in Philadelphia. But its negative connotation troubles retailers. No one wants customers associating their stores with chaos and frustration and overwhelmed police officers. What if the phrase could be reframed? What if black could mean something positive? In accounting, there's a long-standing practice of recording losses in red ink and profits in black. A business operating at a loss is in the red. A profitable business is in the black. What if Black Friday represented the day when retailers finally moved from red to black, from loss to profit? What if it marked the moment when the year's accumulated expenses were finally overcome by holiday sales, when the ledger books shifted from red ink to black? This explanation catches fire. It's perfect. It transforms negativity into celebration, chaos into success. Retailers embrace it enthusiastically, repeat it to journalists, include it in their marketing materials. The day after Thanksgiving becomes Black Friday nationally. Not the disaster of 1869, not the Philadelphia police ordeal, but the day of black ink, of profit, of commercial triumph. Whether this accounting explanation is actually accurate, whether retailers truly operated at a loss for 11 months and became profitable only during the holidays, is less important than its emotional truth. It feels right. It gives meaning to the name, turns it from something merchants endured into something they celebrate. Through the 1980s and 90s, Black Friday grows in prominence. Stores open earlier, advertise more aggressively, offer deeper discounts designed to draw crowds at dawn or even in the middle of the night. Doorbuster deals become a phenomenon. Limited quantity items at shocking prices, available only to the first customers through the door. People begin camping outside stores on Thanksgiving night, sleeping on sidewalks in sleeping bags, thermoses of coffee in hand, all to be first in line when the doors open. The chaos that Philadelphia police dreaded in the 1950s has gone national, but now it's celebrated. News cameras capture footage of stampeding shoppers, of checkout lines that stretch the length of stores, of parking lots full by 5 in the morning. Black Friday has become a cultural event, a ritual, almost a holiday unto itself. Some participate out of necessity, hunting for deals on gifts they couldn't otherwise afford. Others do it for the thrill, for the competition, for the story they'll tell afterward about the television they scored for $200 off, or the toy they found that was sold out everywhere else. The term spreads beyond America's borders. By the 2000s, other countries are adopting Black Friday even without a Thanksgiving holiday to anchor it. Retailers in the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Brazil, Germany, and dozens of other nations create their own versions, offering sales and promotions in late November, joining what has become a global shopping phenomenon. And somewhere in all of this transformation, the original Black Friday, Jay Gould and James Fisk's Gold Panic of 1869, fades from popular memory. It remains in history books, in economics textbooks, in academic discussions of the Gilded Age. But when people say Black Friday now, they're not thinking of telegraph keys clicking out gold prices or mobs gathering on Wall Street calling for speculators' heads. They're thinking of shopping carts and credit cards, of sales and savings, of the unofficial start to the holiday season. Two words, the same two words, have completed a journey of more than a century, from financial catastrophe to retail celebration, from red ledgers to black, from the clicking of telegraph machines to the beeping of barcode scanners. What we value has changed. In 1869, gold was a measure of wealth, the foundation of the economy, worth scheming and conniving and risking national financial stability to control. Today, our temple is the shopping mall, our ritual the hunt for deals, our gold replaced by goods, electronics and clothing, toys and appliances, things to fill our homes and lives. The transformation of Black Friday reflects something about America itself, about how we've moved from an economy based on commodities and precious metals to one based on consumer goods, from scarcity to abundance, from production to consumption. The words remain the same, but their meaning has been completely inverted. What was once dark is now bright. What meant ruin now means prosperity. Language evolves, adapts, transforms itself to serve the needs of the moment. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider this. How many other phrases in our language have traveled similar journeys? How many words that once meant one thing now mean something entirely different? Our language is alive, always changing, always adapting to new circumstances. And sometimes, in that change, we find reflections of who we were, who we are, and who we're becoming. Rest now. Let the story settle into your mind like snow falling on quiet streets. From gold to goods, from crisis to commerce, from telegraph to smartphone, the thread connecting them all is human nature, human desire, human ingenuity in taking what is and transforming it into what might be. Sweet dreams. May your Friday, whatever color it may be, bring you what you need. If you enjoyed this journey through time, please like this video and subscribe to Pillow Trace for more stories to accompany your rest.